New Hampshire State Representative Jeanine Nodder, and you're watching Chattin with Jeanine. Recently, I did a show on scuba diving, and I have asked the diving expert to come back again for a continuation of that show, and I also invited Representative Greg Hill. So welcome, Greg.
Thank
and
you,
Louis
Jeanine.
Figueroa, my constituent.
Thank
you, the diving expert, or expert diver. Does it matter which way it goes?
I'll go with either.
On the previous show, and I think I have a picture from the previous show, we had, there we are, there's red, white, and blue. Dan Coyle, the aquatic specialist shop owner. He teaches people how to go scuba diving, and I guess you do that too. And we had pictures shown on that episode, but not all of them came through when you sent them to me. So I thought, well, let's do another show. Because we also talked about a bill to legalize taking a lobster with your bare hands out of the ocean. And I have this habit of, I talk with my hands, like if I'm trying to say weather, tornado, I go like this, and I went like this. So since that show, people pass me in the hall and they do this now to me. So.
Well, the deputy speaker was doing it during the hearing in the House as well. So.
Oh, he was.
Don't feel bad.
Okay. So I'm not the only one. And I have a stack of books on next to me. It's a book written by. It has nothing to do with this, but Senator Kevin Avard, and he wrote this book about the Quaker parrot. That was a bill that I sponsored when I was a freshman. He was a co-sponsor, and you were also a co-sponsor, so thank you. And I'm really excited about this book. I'm in it, and I'm a cartoon, and I've always wanted to be a cartoon, so it's really
I'm surprised
cool.
you didn't do a song with it.
Give him time.
Okay.
Give him time. All right, so where we left off, we were talking about the lobster bill. It's House Bill
442.
442. And what is the status of that bill right now?
So we.
And what is the bill?
So just last week, we passed the legislation in the House. Very strong bipartisan vote, 271, I think, to 100 against. So now that bill moves on to the Senate. Their version of the Fish and Game Committee. I'm not really sure of the name of it, but they will be meeting on April 4th at 9 o'clock.
All right. Now, Louis, I learned about all this through you because you gave me a call because you're a diver and you see these lobsters and you told me about this lobster traps. But let's look at some pictures from the hearing. Oh, well, we'll get to that too.
That was a picture.
That's you testifying in the Fish and Game Committee on January 31st, Representative Greg Hill.
And that is House Bill 442.
And there's my constituent, Louis Figueroa, also testifying.
Yeah, Dave Coyle behind me, he had also testified as well.
Yes, and he's the owner who was on the last show of Aquatic Specialist. All right, so now we can go look at the other photos because we were looking at a trap and with a big carp inside. Now, see, I'm seeing the two little circles, and I would just assume that that's how he got in, but that's not true. What are the circles for then?
So what you're looking at, that's a lobster trap, or pot, but what you're looking at is a cod inside that. And the way that traps work, they trap the animal they go into an opening, and it's a one-way opening. So that's how the fish got there. And to answer your question, those two holes, that's part of an escape hatch. So in theory, there are little metal pieces of metal that will corrode, and that trap will open within a year so that any animal can get out.
But the animal's dead in a year.
The animal's not going to be fed unless, I don't know how the animal's going to get food other than
other animals that come in and get stuck, and then they attract more food, and then they attract more food, and they all get stuck in the trap.
But the bigger issue is that cod is bigger than the size of the trap. Now, let's assume that the trap did come out, and let's assume that the cod could get out, but the issue is that traps in the mud will eventually settle, and that trap escape hatch will be covered or blocked, or you see a lot of growth around that. You're going to see in the top, you see mussels, you see seaweed, you see tunicates, all this organic stuff that is going to plug that trap. So even if the trap escape hatch comes off, it's still blocked.
Right.
Ah,
So
okay.
it's not a
And
pretty good.
That cod's going to die.
Yes.
Is the sum and substance of all of that. That whatever is in that trap, if it grows too big, that to be able to come out, it's going to die in there, and then it becomes bait for the next round of animals to want to go in and
Right.
eat that bait.
so there's an issue now with our waters being with legalized littering, because these traps are all over the ocean floor and no one can pick them up. 'Cause
And
it's
on the
illegal.
surface, yeah.
Yep. And on the surface, Senator Kevin Avard took this picture.
I think so. He sent me a couple of pictures. This looks like one of them on Hampton Beach when he was talking about his bill for the Hampton Beach Pier.
The pier he'd like to put in. Yeah.
But it is, this is the view that most people see of lobster traps. They don't see the ones that are, as you say, littering the ocean floor.
No, you're a diver as well, aren't you?
I am. This is the picture that most people see of what we call derelict or ghost traps. They wash up during a storm or something like that. But the ones that are trapped and wrapped up in ropes and fishing nets and every other thing that's in the Piscataqua and on our seacoast, most people don't get to see, Jeanine.
Mm-hmm. Well, so we have our diving expert who sees a lot of this under the water.
Yeah, I asked Louis if he would be able to take some pictures of on a dive. He came back and said, I did a 30-minute dive off of the UNH Pier in Newcastle, and came back with 17 photos, some of which I guess you've seen
We're
here.
going to see them on a video. So if we can run that tape. All right, what are we looking at? A big mess, a tire.
Yeah, so this is one of the two dives that I did
tires.
that day. I did one off in Harts Cove in the, right by the UNH Pier. And this is off of Pierce Island. There's a dog park. It's a very popular dive site. And what you're looking at right now are two large mangles of derelict pots that are still trapping and collecting animals and that's just one data point. Mm-hmm. Throughout all the coast of New Hampshire, there are larger pot mangles, especially off of sites off the Sarah Long Bridge, along the Memorial Bridge. In the coast.
There's a lot of derelict lobster traps underwater, but how do they get there?
A couple of different ways. Sometimes there's storms that break the surface buoy that attaches to the trap, and so sometimes a boat will go over that rope and detach the buoy, and then there's no way for the fishermen, for the lobstermen, to be able to retrieve that trap once that connection to the surface is broken.
So part of House Bill 442 would allow people like you to go and get the traps, get the litter off the ocean floor?
Partly. The goal is for House Bill 442 to allow divers to first identify where those traps are and report them to the Fish and Game authorities. Then there's, more importantly, as we've talked with that picture of the cod that's stuck inside, this would allow the divers for the first time to be able to actually touch the trap in order to open it and release any of the animals that are inside.
Because they're currently not allowed to touch. So, okay.
Not able to touch. So, and then from there, hopefully, another piece of legislation would allow or create a program for actually removing those traps from the bottom of the ocean.
And then the other component of the bill would actually allow you to, if you see a lobster, you can just grab it and take it up and take it home and have dinner. And because right now that's illegal. Now I think there's commercial fishermen who say that's
poaching or reducing their ability to catch.
Like they're going to go bankrupt if you take 3 lobsters a day. But how many lobsters are there, and are there enough to go around?
Louis?
Yeah, so we did an estimate, a very conservative estimate, but the bottom line is it's like less than 1% of what they call the landings of lobster that are taken through recreational scuba. That's not just in what we anticipate in the state of New Hampshire, but that's a statistic that's throughout all the states that allow for diving for lobsters, south of here, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. So it's negligible.
So the other states that allow scuba divers to take lobsters with their bare hands, their fishermen haven't gone out of business?
No, they haven't.
And they've been doing this
we
in the
are-
50s.
We are lucky to have nearby Massachusetts. That's one state that's been allowing what House Bill 442 is asking us to do, or asking the law to allow. So we've been able to use their statistics in terms of the licenses that they've sold and the amount of lobsters that those divers have been able to catch, to be able to work backwards and find out how many lobsters are we actually talking about that divers would be able to take in the short season that we're asking for in that bill. Mm-hmm. And it works out to, as Lewis said, the calculations come out to 0.9 lobsters per hour of diving, so less than a lobster per hour. And the quick survey we did of all of the divers that would be interested in this kind of a license, it looks like they would be able to dive somewhere between 4 and 8 hours over the time of the season that we've put in this. So very few lobsters.
I had a question about if they bite you, can they break your hand? I mean, how strong are they?
I mean, you don't want to put your hand in front of them. It's not the right way to get them. You don't put yourself in that situation because you get the lobster from behind, from the body. It's not an effective method to grab them from the claws, A, because you get pinched, and B, because the claws come off, and you don't want the claws off.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a good thing. They don't come with the little rubber bands on
Right,
there.
I
You
knew
know
that. Yes,
right?
I did
Yeah,
know
okay.
that. I know. I said in the last show, I know nothing. I know absolutely nothing. I even had to get a refresher course on what scuba stands for. But now I remember, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. So.
Very good.
Correct.
All right. So how many lobster traps get lost by commercial lobstermen?
So
I keep saying fishermen, but it's lobstermen, right? Yeah.
So the numbers that we have been told and come from, there's a federal authority that governs a lot of the taking of lobsters. It controls all of the taking of lobsters up and down the East Coast. That group uses the 10% number of the amount of lobster traps that are in the water. Roughly 10% of them are lost every year. So for New Hampshire, to give you an idea, the possible number of traps that are being utilized in any given year, last year was 110,000 traps were in the water that were actually fishing. The ones that were lost work out at 10% to be about 11,000 traps that are lost per year, I guess. Mm-hmm. It goes further there, though. The math continues if you really want to delve into it. The company in Maine that I think we have a video of that does that, the cleanups in Booth Bay Harbor, they say that the traps that they bring up from the bottom, 2/3 of them, 66%, have live animals inside them.
Are you talking about the little clip where they're throwing them back?
That's
that
something
another clip?
different.
Okay.
That's
All right, so
where
we want to see the video clip that we're going to watch and not talk, right?
Sure.
All right, so let's play that one.
This is the company.
Yeah.
For the last 2 months, we've been working with a team of divers, boat operators, and boat owners to both identify areas that have high densities of traps. We've identified over 850 traps around just a number of spots here in the harbor. And then once we've finished identifying our hotspots, we started with a team of divers and lobster boat owner here to start hauling traps out of the water. Using a couple of different methods, and we're refining our techniques to keep the process smooth and efficient for all. And as of right now, we've pulled over or nearly 100 traps out of the ocean, and by the end of the week, we should be over 100.
We want to get them off the bottom so that the fishermen can get their traps to bottom. Also, continue to fish. We want to get the trash out of the water so that we can have a clean ocean. We're just trying to do our part on that, thinking globally, acting locally.
They look like giant bugs.
They call them bugs.
You eat bugs. Can't afford to eat bugs.
I guess that's true. But that is a small film. There's some others that are available that show, and Buzz Scott, that's shown on that film, is the owner of that non-for-profit company that's coming down and testifying, and talking about how he does it and what he sees when he takes these lobsters up and finds live animals in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's what we're trying to stop.
What's important is that organization, he worked in concert with the commercial lobstermen harvesters on a pilot program, allowing them to touch touch traps that meet the criteria that are, that are severed lines. And I've had the pleasure of they rely on volunteers. I've gone out there and helped them to survey the traps, how many are out there, and to retrieve. So it's a program I'd love to be able to replicate here with other organizations if we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the ones that were being pulled up there had been there for a while. There was a great cloud that was coming up when they were pulling the trap, and so how long they've been there, we don't know, and how many animals they're responsible for killing, we don't know.
Wow. So we do have one more clip. I'm just going to go ahead and play it so we can get that out of the way. And what are we looking at? And what are they throwing out? It looks like fish.
Those are lobsters.
They're little lobsters?
That's a commercial lobsterman releasing out into the water lobsters that they cannot take, that are either short in terms of size or egg bearing. So there's an egg bearing female lobster with 10,000 eggs being whipped out.
I know, it looks kind of mean the way they're
But that's
them like that.
what we're trying to say is that the way that we're advocating with this lobster bill, it's a much more humane way, sustainable way to get the resource than if I were to get a 5-pot non-commercial license. At the time that I release the lobsters that are short, by the time they get down to the water, they're susceptible to prey, striped bass, and then once they get to the bottom, it's going to take some time for the lobster to find its hidey hole to get back into a safe space. So
some of the divers will report that they've sat on the bottom and watched lobster boats going by and collecting their traps and taking out the keepers and keeping them, and the others they're sending back down, and they can watch the fish follow the lobster traps and wait for the lobsters to come down vulnerable, and just watch the fish attack those lobsters as they come down.
Well, maybe they can chase the fish off or leave the lobsters alone. They're good eating. We want to eat them too.
There's 110,000 of those out there. You can't really follow every lobster boat.
Have there been any safety incidents for scuba diving for crabs and scallops and whatever else which divers can take now?
Oh, as
You know,
far
'cause
as
right
far
now
back
divers
as we've
can
been
take-
going, we've been asking for reports, and there have been 0 incident reports of any recreational scuba related incidents, safety issues, altercations with boats since we've been able to legally scuba dive for recreational for crabs and scallop.
So you can get crabs but not lobsters.
Crabs, scallops, but not lobsters for some reason.
Is there a concern of law enforcement in other states that allow recreational scuba diving for lobsters?
So we had reached out to a lot of the local state Department of Marine Resources for the various states, Rhode Island, Massachusetts down, and 0 issues. Law enforcement is it's not the burden that has been portrayed in New Hampshire in the other states. It's a non-issue.
So the law enforcement in New Hampshire, do they put on the scuba gear and go into the water?
That's the
To enforce
perception.
the law?
That's that. If you think about it, the analogy is if for hunting today, you do not see conservation officers going into the woods following the lobster, or I'm sorry, following the hunters. Just as conservation officers are not going to don scuba gear, it's not a standard practice. What they do is it's monitored during the normal course of operations. So what they're doing is they're doing periodic checking boats, looking to see if the fish that you brought up or the lobsters, are they of legal size? Do you have your permit? Are you old enough to be taking the animal under the normal course of operations? They may get a tip from someone thinking that someone's poaching, so they'll investigate it with binoculars from a distance, but it's not the perception that conservation officers, law enforcement have to be certified and go in the water and catch the divers in the act. It's just not how it's done.
Noticed that you have a pile of papers in front of you, and can you tell me what that's all about?
Well, your questions have answered a lot of the little points that I had written as far as notes go, Jeanine. But we were mostly talking about getting back to the video you saw of the company in Maine that does the cleanups now, and the fact that 2/3 of those traps that they bring up were having live animals in them. We started working backwards from those numbers and trying to determine just how many traps would have to be pulled out to equal what any of the divers could possibly take, or the combination of all the divers could possibly take. And it works out to somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000, a little over 1,000. If they took 1,000 of these traps that are still fishing, but derelict traps on the bottom of our rivers and or Piscataqua River and the ocean, if we took those 1,000 traps out, that would equal what the divers are possibly able to take in a year.
Okay.
So it's eminently possible, and it would make for a better environment. So we think it's a very good bill, and we think we'll have a good success with the Senate and then with the governor.
I'll have to do a follow-up segment on a future show to.
We'll do it underwater.
Underwater. Yeah, that would be cool.
It would. Yeah.
Can you talk underwater? I mean, I know nothing about scuba diving.
We do a lot of hand signals. Yeah.
Oh, you do hand signals? Okay.
Yeah.
They do have specialized equipment that allow people to talk, but it doesn't sound as nice as your voice does now, certainly.
We had talked about the bends on the previous show and the explanation of the bends, and like right after that, I was watching something and somebody had the bends. Oh, I think it was Amazon Prime. It was a show about London Hospital. It was called London Hospital. It's like a little mini series about what it's like to be in the hospital 100 years ago. And these two men, they came up and they had to go
Caisson
put in the
disease. They
decompression.
were the people
Caisson.
working on bridges. Even in the U.S. with Brooklyn Bridge, it was an issue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
A lot of this you actually do know. You may not think you do, but you've taken high school biology. You've taken high school physiology, perhaps.
I read a lot, too.
There are a lot of parts of this. I always think this is a great program. The Scuba from Aquatic Specialties and others. It's a great thing for kids to get involved in because it teaches real life chemistry, biology, physiology, all kinds of things get brought in, and they're having fun at the same time.
And they have an appreciation for life in the sea.
They do. It would be great for any of the kids that are thinking of a marine biology career or something.
Oceanography,
like
or
yeah.
even any of the. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I know Lewis ends up picking up some of the samples and brings them
Yes.
to
Science.
Eco Science Center,
Yep,
Rutledge
for-
Marine
for-
Lab. Yeah.
touch pools.
Yes. Yeah, I've been there. I've taken the kids there.
There you go.
Yeah.
So
And now
any
I
of
have
those
grandbabies,
kids,
so when they get old enough, I'll take them there.
there you go. They have to know where these things come from, and our job, I think, with this bill is to make sure that the ocean floor is as clean as possible, so that those animals can remain.
I know you worked very hard on this bill, and And you were a big part of it too. And I didn't know you knew each other. So it's kind of
Ah.
cool. It's a small world, small state.
We met through this bill, I think,
It was,
didn't we?
yeah,
Oh.
it was the diver bond,
The diver
the scuba
bond.
diver bond. That's it. That's the.
Well, Greg and
He-
I were freshman reps together in 2010. So,
Okay.
as well as Senator Kevin Avard. He was a freshman rep with us.
Yep, and worked on that.
Yeah, we all worked on
That
the
was
parrot
from our
bill, so-
freshman year, I believe.
From parrots to lobsters,
It's,
and then
it's
yeah.
the same thing. Yep. But it's all good things. It's all about trying to make sure that our environment stays clean, and divers can use the same natural resources that all of us can enjoy.
Yeah,
And
it
you
should be.
you went diving today.
Yeah, I went today. Yep, yep.
39 degrees.
Oh,
39 degrees.
now I'm
It's
cold.
spring.
Yeah.
But this is no, this isn't. It's a resource I think that should be shared by all. It shouldn't be limited to a small population of commercial lobstermen. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. Is I can do this in Massachusetts now as we have vacation property, so I'm a resident. I have residency in Massachusetts, but I'd like to be able to do this in my backyard. That's my
All right.
goal.
And we seem to be able to do it up and down the East Coast. It makes no sense to not be able to do it in New Hampshire.
Oh, and I couldn't end the show without pointing out your tie. I don't know if we can get a close-up on that, but you've got lobsters and crabs and shells and
It's my lucky lobster tie.
lucky lobster tie. All right.
It worked last week when we passed through the House with it. So I'm not taking it off until we pass it in the Senate.
Nice. Well, thank you, Greg.
Thank you. Good to see you
Representative
again.
Hill and Lewis.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. And I'll be back, and I'll see you when we vote on that budget. Lord help us.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.